Okay, thanks for joining everybody, and many thanks for getting all the papers out well in advance too. It's much appreciated. If I drop off the call this morning, Alistair, would you mind taking over the chair till I be able to be reconnected? Thanks. Welcome, of course, to colleagues from the Police Authority, Police Scotland, HMICS, and I'm advised that colleagues from Scottish Government will join us a little bit later this morning too. For those that are presenting, just a little reminder that we have got the papers, we've read them all in advance, so if you can keep your introductory remarks to a minimum, that would be grateful. That allows us plenty of time then for discussion and questions. Sarah, I've also got your note that you need to leave after the first hour, so thanks for advising that in advance. I've got no apologies, however, Angela Leach will join us closer to 10 AM this morning. However, I can confirm that we are quorate. I'd like to invite members to declare any interests or connections. None? Okay, thank you very much. And we have not taken any matters out with committee since the last time. In terms of item 1.4, decision on taking business in private, are members content to take agenda items 6 through to 8 in private in accordance with the reasons outlined in the papers and as per section 20 of the SPA standing orders? Yes, thank you very much. So that moves us on to item 2. The Resources Committee minute from the 18th of November has been circulated. I'm aware there's a typo on the actual minutes. It states the 17th of November. That will be corrected. And with that in mind, are members content to approve the draft as an accurate record? Yes, thanks very much. Moving on to the action log and matters arising. There are 2 actions that are proposed for closure, and there are 3 actions that are not yet due. Are members content to note the status of the action log? Yes, thanks very much. And also to approve the action log, yes? Yes, thank you. So that takes us into the agenda item 3.1, Period 7 Financial Monitoring Report, and I'm going to hand over to Lynn. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. So, yeah, I'll be brief just in the comments and assume the report is read. So I was just really going to call out the key highlights. So the Period 7 report to the end of October is included at Appendix A. So in terms of revenue, we are 800k under our Q2 forecast. That's predominantly due to timing, particularly within the non-pay area. So that's kind of outlined in the dashboard at the front, and then there's more detail included in the body of the report on that. We have previously reported that the forecast is currently in line with funding and budget, and that continues to be monitored, and we will revise that at the end of December in terms of the Q3 forecast. We had a bit of a discussion at the last committee around Operation Roll and Operation Aucklate in terms of the additional costs that were associated with that. So we have now confirmed with government that the funding transfer will be provided as part of the spring budget revision. So the report quotes a number of 24.4 million, but it's 24.7 is what has been agreed with government, just given there was a bit of movement in the cost there. So we'll see that coming through as part of that spring budget revision. And we have also been having positive discussions with SG around the inflation guarantee, which we also spoke about at the last committee, and an additional interim amount has been included as part of the spring budget revision, albeit we can't confirm actual impact until mid-January when the inflation numbers are known. So the November inflation numbers should be known probably in the next few days, and then December into mid-January, but not expecting anything hugely materially different from what we've been discussing with government. So it's just for assurance to members that that additional funding will be transferred now as part of the budget revisions. Capital, we're slightly ahead of the Q2 forecast, and we continue to see that improving trend in capital in terms of spending commitments. Again, closely monitored through Capital Planning Task Force, Capital Investment Group, and that work is actively ongoing. So again, also forecasting that break-even position in line with our funding. And then reform is slightly behind our forecast, and we're looking at that in the overall context of the revenue budget. And again, will be closely monitored through those investment planning groups. But that was really all I was looking to sort of call out from the P7 report, but happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lynn, and that's really positive news in terms of the two of those significant areas that we were concerned about, the op roll costs and the inflation potential element of the pay award. Thanks for clarifying those. I'll hand over to members now. Alistair.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks, Lynn, again for the paper. And just echoing the words of the Chair there, the concerns that we discussed in quite a bit of detail at last meeting in relation to op roll and the potential inflation guarantee and the impact on the budget. Credit to everybody for all the work that goes on, I know, behind the scenes in relation to these things. I've just got a couple of questions for you. One is in relation to overtime spend, which still continues to run, sorry for the expression, quite hot. And there's an explanation around that in terms of the unprecedented number of protests that we have seen going on across Scotland, and a lot of activity in relation to serious and organised crime. But one of the things that I was reflecting on is that you hear a lot in the media at the moment. You hear a lot of public health warnings in relation to the very high levels of flu that we're currently experiencing. So these are the kind of things that impact on all organisations. So I'm just wondering, in relation to overtime, because this is something that happens every year, do we have enough money put aside each year into the overtime pot, as it were? What's the reflections going forward? Obviously there's an increase in budget being asked for, potentially an increase in officers, which could impact on that. But every year we seem to have this conversation. So I just wondered around that. And the other question was in relation to capital. It seems to me that that longer term strategy that you've adopted for capital is having some of the intended effect, but there's a lot of complexity going forward. There's some significant pressures, a state being one of them, going forward. So I just wondered what the thinking is at this moment in time in terms of reflecting on the strategy you've adopted and how you maintain it as fit for purpose in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm happy to come in, and others may wish to add to it. So in terms of the overtime spend, yes, we've spoke quite a bit about overtime this financial year, and as you've mentioned, it's always a topic in the previous years as well, given that some instances there will be a need for reactive overtime, and it's just the nature of the service. So there'll be unplanned events that like the presidential visits, for example, during the summer. So in terms of what we've been doing internally, so obviously each business area looks and scrutinises their own sort of budget, activity, etc. But at a kind of strategic level, we've got the overtime management group stood back up, which we implemented initially, I think, in financial year 23-24. And that's to look at the financial impact, the wellbeing impact, and the overall impact of all overtime activity across the force, to really just understand the causes for it. And as you've mentioned, we've already went to Parliament to say we are seeing pressure on the services, the operational demands are increasing, etc. So in terms of what is in the Q2 forecast, additional money has been reallocated to overtime in the forecast, and we will continue to look at that through that sort of overtime management group. But there is a nature of that will be unpredictable. Like it is a variable cost, and it's a reason why we highlight it as a risk, and we need to look at it in the, you know, the overall context of the operational demand, the officer numbers, you know, any specific events, etc. So that work is actively ongoing and continues throughout the year. We've also recently had an internal audit review done of overtime in terms of the processes and where improvements can be made in like the processes themselves and, you know, areas like that. So collectively, it's getting looked at across the organisation. Just in terms of capital, so yes, we're seeing significant improvements in terms of that year to date spend, particularly when you look at the same point last financial year. What I would say is there's still work to be done in the final quarter of the year. There are still commitments to be made, and there are still, you know, like that sort of back end spend that historically falls in that final quarter of the financial year. So again, a lot of detailed work ongoing across all of the business areas to look at landing that capital budget. But as you mentioned, going forward, it's that longer term planning approach and that pipeline. So we've done a lot of work. We've fed into government as part of the spending reviews around the funding requirements, you know, to deliver, whether it's our estates master plan, our digital transformation, all of which have significant multi-year commitments. And we spoke a bit about that at Parliament as well, and the limitations of annual funding settlements in terms of being able to commit multi-year. So again, discussions ongoing with government around that. In terms of 26-27, we've asked business areas to continue to plan, continue to look at procurement, go through governance, etc. But obviously we won't know our funding settlement until the 13th of January, at which point we'll have a review through Capital Investment Group and continue to understand what the impact of any future funding and flexibility around funding arrangements that may be available in future years.
Alistair?
Yeah, thank you, you know, very, very much for those responses, Lynn. That all makes sense to me, both in relation to the capital and the overtime spend. You know, the increasing, probably not increasing. I think the complexity of Police Scotland is well known, and the complexity of delivering capital expenditure to support the organisation is well known. So you know, welcome, you know, the focus that is on it. No room for complacency given the good impact you've had so far. Just in relation to the overtime spend, my only comment on that is the nature of policing is that there will be a lot of unplanned events that occur, but my thought is perhaps that every year they might be different, but there's always unplanned events. So it's just reflecting that going forward and the budget planning is just my only thought on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alistair. Angela hasn't joined us yet, but I know that she did want to ask a question around savings. I think paragraph 1.4. Pardon?
I've literally just arrived.
You've just arrived. Fantastic timing, Angela. Whilst I'll let you collect your thoughts in, I'll go to Tom and then I'll come back to you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks very much, Lynn. And like Alistair said, real appreciation of the complexity in this budget and the work that's ongoing. My question in relation to capital and the 71 million included a forecast around capital receipts. Is there any update you can give us on capital receipts? Are they matching what our expectations would be, or is that a risk that lies there?
So in terms of what we've got in the Q2 forecast, we're pretty much still in line with where we're at. We're obviously looking at that now in terms of revising the Q3 forecast, but I'm not aware of anything to suggest it will be any significantly less than what's included. Obviously, again, capital receipts is a big area for us to consider going forward, and I know we've spoken about that a few times at committee in terms of as we start to get into delivery of estates master plan, how do we manage any sort of significant capital receipts? But in terms of what we've got here in the 25-26 position, at the minute, everything appears to be kind of in line with what we're predicting in the Q2 forecast.
Thanks, Lynn. Angela, over to yourself.
Thanks, Chair, and apologies for being slightly late for the meeting. Lynn, thanks for the report, comprehensive as always. I just wanted to ask a bit about the 9 million of non-pay savings and efficiencies. And as you point out in your report, you're saying that that's quite a tall order, quite a challenge, given that 14% of the budget relates to non-pay. Could you just expand on how that's been taken forward? What what work has been done to try and actually meet that target of £9 million?
Yeah, of course. So the £9 million savings was included as part of the original approved budget that was approved by the authority back in March, and that cut across quite a number of the non-pay budgets. So there was, there was like savings around like utilities, like rent, then maybe like some lower level savings and across the whole non-pay budget. But the point is well made. We already have a very lean non-pay budget, which makes it very difficult to achieve like any significant future savings in that budget. In terms of where we are in the current financial year, so page 7 of the appendix sort of provides a breakdown of the main non-pay areas. Now, what I would say is overall, it is monitored as part of the monthly monitoring with budget holders in terms of where we're at, in terms of year-to-date spend, forecast, and it's obviously reported collectively through Finance People Board, yourselves, and into boards. But that summary in terms of page 7 shows that on a year-to-date basis, non-pay spend is currently under Q2 forecast, some of it due to timing, just in terms of when we've got deliveries, etc. And then if you look at the right-hand side of that table, there are some variances in there, but it's getting managed collectively. So I guess the answer to the question is it gets monitored and managed as part of the overall budget. In terms of what was included as the savings in the budget at the time of budget approval, I had, there's not huge overspends coming in those areas. Those sort of actions, predictions are getting managed as part of that overall budget management. But essentially it would need to be managed in the context of the overall budgets in terms of the variances across the different budget lines if we started to see any significant overspends happening in those areas. But at the moment it's been managed.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Can I just ask a follow-up question to that in terms of the recurring, non-recurring nature of those savings and what that means in terms of kind of a budget planning for future years?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what we do when we're looking at the budget, so at the moment we're looking at the budget for 26, 27, and we would really try to understand that, what is recurring, what is genuine. We've made that saving, the activity has reduced and we are now not incurring that cost, versus something like, where we've had a one-off benefit. And where we've seen a one-off benefit in our non-pay budget this current financial year is that other employee costs, and that's where our VR budget is held, for example. And we've seen, and I think again we spoke about this at the last committee, just in terms of how that underspend was coming about and what activity was ongoing. But we know next year that benefit won't be there. So we've been doing a lot of work internally about how do we support recurring costs with that, where we've used non-recurring benefits, etc. So it's certainly something that we can draw out in the budget reports as we go through, like the budget development group, etc. But it is monitored at that sort of detailed level as part of the budget planning work. But certainly happy to sort of expose some of that in more detail through the detailed budget discussions.
Yeah, that would be really helpful, Lynn, because that must be putting tremendous pressure into future years in terms of the kind of a one-off benefits that we've had, for example, in terms of the VR costs and income or avoided costs in that space. Thanks very much, everybody, for all that you're doing in terms of what lies behind what makes up this report. We know it's been extremely challenging year, and it will continue to be for the remainder. So thanks very much to all business areas in terms of taking this extremely seriously and working to achieve our financial targets. Really, really important in terms of being able to deliver value for the public purse. So thank you. Moving on to item 3.2, I'll just give you A brief verbal update from the last meeting of the Budget Development Group. We've had one meeting on the 20th of November since the Resources Committee last met. And at that, we reflected on the Criminal Justice Committee evidence sessions and the follow-up meetings that took place with the Cabinet Secretaries for Justice and for Finance and Local Government. And we heard that during these discussions, senior officers and staff continued to formally make the case for additional investment in policing, including the proposed increase in officer and staff numbers that had previously been discussed at the Budget Development Group. We also heard that detailed budget preparation work is ongoing, including scenario planning. The draft Scottish Budget is due to be published on the 13th of January 2026, and so we expect formal consideration of the policing budget by the Resources Committee in March 2026. Is there anything anybody wants to ask or to add to that update? No? Okay, thank you. We will keep this as a standing agenda item, as we said last time. Takes us on to section 4 then, and estates, consultation and pre-disposal process. And I think we're going to be joined by Donna Valance for this item.
Here, Donna hasn't actually joined the call yet. She had a clash, so was going to join us at 10 o'clock. But I see that we have one of our colleagues, Elliot, from the estates team. Is it possible that you could perhaps introduce the report?
Yeah, that's no problem. Morning,
Thanks so much.
everyone. So we've provided a paper in relation to the estates consultation pre-disposal process. It's effectively a process to guide the organisation through the required stages of an estates project, and a project that could involve one or more proposals to declare a site surplus, relocate operational officers, public-facing estate, or relocation of staff. It's been a collective piece of work by the estates projects team alongside HR, corporate comms, strategy and site engagement. And through its development, we've also engaged and had feedback from Unison and Unite. It isn't a process to dictate how we manage and deliver projects, but it's to set out and guide the organisation on the relevant steps that we need to follow in relation to responsibilities to engage, consult and communicate with stakeholders, the public, staff and officers throughout a project's life cycle. Similarly, not all of the steps in the process apply to every project, and some steps can be skipped depending on whether they're applicable or not. For instance, if there's no staff involved in a project, there'd be no requirement to follow the steps related to JNCC and the like. Alongside the process, we've set up a bi-weekly meeting that includes colleagues from HR, corporate comms and strategy and site engagement, and we've got an associated tracker that follows us through the steps according to the process and related to each individual project. So we make sure we follow the process for each specific project in chronological order according to the process. Process was previously taken to the Estates Priority Group on the 2nd of October, the National Estates Board on the 28th of October, and a follow-up of the latter board was to also consider a strategic overview version of the process, just covering and highlighting the key stages of the process, with the wider process sitting behind that document itself that we use internally. Welcome any comments, feedback, input, queries.
Thanks very much, Elliot. Tom.
Thanks, Elliot. That's really helpful. And I've read the appendices with interest, and it very clearly sets out the consultation process internally for Police Scotland. And I don't really know that it'd be yourself that would answer this. It might be DCC Smith or one of the colleagues. At nowhere in that process does it cover the role in this of the Scottish Police Authority. And it's just interesting, how do we achieve that and be explicit in terms of what's required? I've got a wee follow up and come back to Project Falcon, but if we could maybe deal with that first.
I'll let
ACC
somebody else take
spares?
that if they're
Yeah.
better placed.
Thanks, Tom. And I think, it is really important that the SPA have a really clear line of sight on this. So what we have sought to do is we have established the National Estates Board, and we see that as a primary function for driving progress as it relates to estates. And within that forum, that group will have the autonomy to make decisions. So it brings together a range of people who are here today, CFO, Transformation Director, and a range of others. I do wonder if in one part we may extend the invitation to the SPA, whether that's on the official side or a board member. But I guess for yourself to have that direct line of sight of the progress that we're making becomes incredibly important. Notwithstanding, we will always come at this committee with regular updates. That might be an avenue to explore. I don't know if that's kind of what you're getting at, but I know we might be taking what we consider to be fairly straightforward decisions, and at times you think, we've closed an office in Rutherglen, or we've done something else over here, and perhaps the movement in the estate space isn't just landing in the way that board members would want, and our ambition would be far greater in this space. So predicated on budget allocation, we would want to be very active in the estate space. I don't know if that's helpful at all.
It's very helpful. If you go back and look at, because it's referenced in the paper itself, we can touch Project Falcon later. There's actually approvals as well. There's delegated authorities, and Falcon was designed around being pragmatic, that we have to move quickly, and sometimes there's opportunity there in the state disposal, etc., or the circumstances that require earlier closure, etc. So that will always be there, but it's more than, I think in some areas it's so strategic, it's more than line of sight. If there was significant national assets there being disposed of, etc., then we need to be clearer on that. So I don't know that we can answer it in this meeting just now, but it's recognising that it's a very useful document internally to Police Scotland. But there's a deficit in terms of not just line of sight, but the role of the Scottish Police Authority. If I give you an example, not that there is any discussion about it even, but if there was an asset in the nature of the Tully Allen or something like that being disposed of, then it wouldn't just be line of sight with the board of the police authority. It would be my argument. So that's my point. But I've got another point on Falcon that I would like to come back, and I don't know if you want to come in just now, Alan.
Could I just, whilst you're collecting your thoughts, Alan, just bring in a couple of people whose hands have raised? And I think, John, you maybe wanted specifically to come in that point, yeah?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, first of all, I've actually just received a message from a colleague that Donna's having IT problems this morning. She has been trying to join, is just struggling to get on, so she will try and get with us as soon as possible. She may be affected by some of the issues elsewhere in Tully Allen, so apologies from that. On those points, yes, I'm having discussions with Donna Valens just now about SPA representation on those estate boards, and so we're just trying to work out where the best place is for myself or other SPA colleagues to do that, which I think will help. And again, some of the questions about where does the SPA fit into this governance process, I've had those discussions with Donna. Effectively, I think what we're saying is the SPA will sit at the start and the end of this process, and what you're seeing is the very, very detailed workings that they do to consider a particular project. So we would expect the Estates Master Plan 2.3, is that outline for when a decision is indicatively being made, and that's what would come to SPA. This is all the detailed working which goes on within the estates team in Police Scotland, and at the very, very end of that, when there is some more concrete proposals, they would come back to the SPA, depending on the value, of course, for approval again. So what you've got is the very detailed workings that start, and effectively we should be at both ends of that process. I hope that helps answer your questions, Tom.
That's really helpful, and probably just takes 2 more boxes in somewhere in the documents, and it clarifies that entirely.
Thanks. And Elliot, did you want to come back in? You're on mute.
Thank you. Just add what DCC Alan Spears mentioned, and touching on what has just been mentioned as well. The process has got there's a note within that process and a stage within it regarding the governance approval for any decisions on a project, and that, depending on the project size, the associated value and sort of strategic importance of that project, would determine what relevant governance would need to be gone through before any decisions are made. And that references the corporate finance framework and the governance framework that we have to work alongside, so that no decisions are made unless they've gone through the relevant approval processes and necessary boards, if required, to make those decisions before they're communicated to public and or officers and staff.
Thanks, Elliot. I must say that I take great assurance from what I've heard in terms of that process. So my thanks to you and your team, Elliot, and to DCC Spears for clarifying that. My final part was around this document references back to decisions taken in 2023, which was around Falcon, etc. And there's been quite a lot of activity, and there was interdependencies in the approvals that were given in that. And it might be circumspect to the future meeting an update report where we just a situation report where we are with Operation Falcon. For instance, we would reference Rutherglen there, but that wasn't specified in Falcon at that time. It's just that was needs must. There was a necessity that came along, and there was community touchdown points or whatever it was called when you start closing stations in some areas. You know, how are we getting on with developing that, etc. So it'd be helpful to have an update at some point.
Thanks, Tom. And I see Donna's been able to join us now. Welcome, Donna. You're not the only one, I think, that's been having IT issues this morning, so you're most welcome. Elliot has been effectively deputising for you whilst you've been able to join, so thanks for that. With regard to Tom's last point, are people content to take that away and give us an update on terms of the progress with Operation Falcon in due course?
Yeah.
Thanks. Tom, did you want to come back? Sorry, Donna.
So I'm just going to say apologies for my technical issues this morning.
No worries at all. Alistair, over to yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Elliot, for walking us through the paper. That was very helpful. And I would just say that I support the comments made by Tom, in relation to the clarity of where the SPA plays its part within what is obviously a complex programme of estates management. My question was really in relation to comms around all of this. Now, clearly this is going to, you're following this through consultation engagement in an effective manner will significantly assist with good comms in the organisation. But I'm conscious that there has been a lot of pretty negative media coverage in relation to station closures, facilities closures, and by expansion, people then start talking about a withdrawal of policing services within those localities. Now, I think there's a real opportunity, for Police Scotland to put across what the reality, what's actually happening, and what the changes are. So, going forward, I can see where this process is going to help. But what are the thoughts, on actually getting on the front foot in relation to this? There's a real public interest in people knowing and understanding, what's happening with the estate and the knock-on effect that changes in the estate will have in relation to the delivery of policing services within their localities.
Yeah. I think we touched on this at the previous Resources Committee. There's a piece of work going on between ourselves and also with comms on this. And that's really just about how we're positioning this and also about accurate reporting, because often it's been the story's been run as if a police station has been closed because all the numbers are being conflated together, and often it's a store, or it's been an old dog kennel, or it's been somewhere that we've stored productions that's been closed. So all buildings are really being classified when it's going out as police stations. There's a piece of work going on with my team just now to try and clarify that, and that will be going on the website by the start of the year. But it's quite a bit of work to go on. Round about the comms on the further closures and anything that's coming forward, there's obviously timing sensitivities on that because people are impacted by it. So it's pretty much on a case-by-case basis. It is something that Tom Halpin had raised at the previous committee. It's something that we're taking really seriously. Deb and I had a chat about it just last week about where we're going with this. So there will be something coming out in that space.
Thanks. ACC Mayor, did you want to come in on that point?
Yeah, just to provide the wider perspective, I think this is a key driver around confidence. When we did the discovery work for local policing, very, very strongly from communities was a sense about local delivery, and they very, very strongly associate that with having a physical presence in the community, and that is strong in all communities, but is stronger in the more remote and rural communities. So in those areas, the closure of a station can seem like policing withdrawing from that community because it's a very physical, visible act. But we know that the data tells us that very few people actually go to those stations or utilise them, and that often there are no police officers on it. So it is a perfect interface between the need to drive community confidence and the need for us to run an efficient, effective business. So part of the community policing model is to seek to engage with communities in more direct, effective ways. That's one of the reasons why we're asking for the uplift in numbers, because we need to do that consistently, methodically in all communities across Scotland. And the hope and anticipation that in doing that, that meets many of the needs of what the physical stations almost as a comfort blanket provided. So being able to use our kind of mobile stations, being able to use community facilities. So my local village has a coffee and a cop event in the village hall, and being able to kind of replicate that. So the two bits have to be read in tandem. I think if we only focus on estates but don't focus on the confidence and community policing model, then we will end up in a real challenge. So I think a lot of the answers to the questions on that sit with us on the business model side of local policing, and ensuring that we're absolutely engaged with the estate strategy and very clearly putting our ask across to Donna. If it's left to the estate side to answer those questions around confidence, I don't think they can do that, and nor can they be expected to. So it's working in those two parts together to get to the right model.
Thank you. Elliot?
Thank you. It was just to add to Donna's point around communication around closures, and I think it's one topic that's been a reoccurring one over the recent months and probably years, as well as how we respond to freedom of information requests and the information that provides. And I think that sometimes can be taken as a skewed viewpoint of the way that the estate's being shrunk is maybe the way it's perceived. Quite often the freedom of information requests we get in will relate to how many closures there've been, and that information, how that's responded to, would just give the closure perspective and doesn't consider or provide information as to where stations have been replaced by new sites and new buildings. And I think that very much puts in a difficult position, because it's very easy to pick up on 100 stations have closed in 15 years, for instance, but it doesn't. That free information request didn't consider the 50 or 60 of those that were actually replaced with replacement buildings or sites, and services just been relocated due to estate condition, operational demand, but there still being a presence in that areas. And I think that's something that we've certainly had issues with corporate comms colleagues in recent months and years.
Thanks, Elliot. Alistair, does that provide further assurance to you around the development of the communications around estates?
Yeah, linking it all together, you know, in the way that Tim has there, and the update from Donna, I probably phrased it slightly wrong, because I do appreciate that it was discussed at the last Resources Committee, and it is actually on the action log, and progress is being made. So it's really just to keep, if this is the right phrase, the pressure up in terms of improving that communication and making those linkages, because it's something that almost on a daily basis, the public are interested in. They want to know what's happening, and you see reports in the newspaper and in the newspapers and across other parts of the media. So appreciate this progress. I would just encourage that to be the pressure and improving this to remain within the organisation.
Thanks very much. Angela.
Thank you, and thanks for the report and the flowchart. It's really, really interesting just to see the stages that you go through. So forgive me if this is in there somewhere and I've just missed it, but it was the bullet point 13B that prompted it, and you talk about the impact assessment, the human rights impact assessment that would be undertaken. I just wonder where the other statutory duties are reflected in decisions like that, at what point, and how they're conveyed to different stakeholders. So I know we've got sustainability, environmental sustainability, we've got children's rights, there's the island's statutory duty and all sorts of different things. So I just wondered where that is reflected, where these impact assessments are then shown, considered, and I suppose our transparency around it. I'll maybe leave it at that just now, Pauline. I've got one other point.
Okay, if I can just pick up on that point. So all of the impact assessments will be, they'll obviously vary. The one that is constant amongst them all is the EQH, and that's why it features on Elliot's flowchart. But if it's an island station, which we're not closing any of them, but that then an island's impact assessment would come through. Various other impacts assessments will be brought into play depending on where the property is, what type of property it is, and what our intentions are for it. So those will come through under general impact assessments, and it's quite a detailed document. There's just an operational mechanism that we have here. Obviously, Elliot's not listed every impact assessment that we do, but when it gets to the impact assessment part, it's all pulled through at that point, depending on what the property is and where it is.
Thank you. Can I just ask, is it a combined impact assessment that you use then, or is it you do strict individual ones depending on the nature of the property?
I see Elliot nodding, so I'll let him come in and give you his detail.
Yeah, so we've only in the document, and as a note, I've mentioned EQHRA purely from the consideration of staff and officer impact, and how they're considered right kind of earlier on in the process, and so that they're considered throughout any proposed project. We also engage with divisions throughout any project and make sure that any specific requirements over those areas are considered, and through the stakeholder engagement the division do alongside the public engagement, we ask that they go and consider and engage with the stakeholders in those areas. So they will vary dependent on what the nature of the area are and the region are, including any scrutiny boards, any local community council meetings and associated boards, to basically make sure that we consider and collate the impact of any proposed project within that specific region and area. And that's collated through a stakeholder engagement toolkit we provide to division. They carry out the engagement and gather that impact and considerations, and feed that back to the project, and that's considered as part of our consultation report that we then compile and will go on the engagement hub.
Okay, thank you, Elliot. That's useful, because one of the key ones is obviously the health inequalities, and I'm just mindful of their public health approach to policing and at a local level, which is really, really important. My other questions relates to the community, and Tim mentioned it, and you've also mentioned it. In particular, I wondered about the statutory requirement that we have to engage with other partners, other community planning partners, if we are going to dispose of a building, and offer them the opportunity to come forward if they think that there's a use for it. And it just prompted a wider thought about that whole engagement. It's linked to Alistair's question about communication, but maybe takes it a wee bit further in terms of making sure that these decisions land as best they can It's always difficult when you're changing the use of something, but that engagement is really important. I just wondered if you could comment further on that.
Yeah, in terms of, I mean, obviously there's a community planning partnerships across the country that we don't have the resource to engage with at every single meeting because there's 32 of them. But we do engage as and when we've got something happening in that area, as and when we're requested to attend a meeting because it's something that we can positively or input to. We consult with, there's stuff going on that we can speak about in private sessions if necessary, where we're in consultation with not only with local authorities but also with ALIOs and any other third sector that's impacted by the work that we've got ongoing. And we're engaging with our partners at every level just now to try and move forward, not only with the disposals process but with our wider agenda. So there is lots of communication going on just now. Often much of it can't be communicated at this stage because of the sensitivities around a lot of it, but I can assure you that that engagement is going on from Scottish Government right down to local authority and ALIO level.
Thanks, Donna. And in terms of your process, is there a part built into this where, you know, if there is a disposal, that statutory requirement to notify your partners is there? And forgive me if I just haven't seen it.
Yeah, it is, but Elliot's put his hand up, so let's go, Elliot. It's your model.
No problem. So obviously the local community will be obviously aware of the proposals being considered at that early consultation stage. Once a project and a decision's then been made and that's communicated, and if, for instance, a building is going to become vacant in an area, that site will then go on the trawl and will be open to consideration for community asset transfer requests from that local area, which we then have to consider and go through the relevant due process and statutory kind of timescales for responses to those. One thing that we have kind of touched on internally within the estates and with partners is to consider a similar process for the decommissioning and disposal element of a project where there is a disposal of a property. And we've just started doing engagement with the asset teams and the compliance managers across the country to try and gather information and formulate a process in the similar format to the one that we've provided today for effectively the subsequent steps of a project where we have a building that's become vacated due to our decisions and a project being delivered. And that will cover the relevant steps that we have to take and follow through for that part of the project as well. And that likelihood is we'll probably return to our board in future months with a sort of secondary process of the follow-on steps to what we've provided today.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Pauline.
Donna, did you want to come back in?
Yeah, just to finish off, as you know, this paper came about today as a kind of follow-on from the 17th of June disposals list. It's our intention that we'll do a wash-up probably at the February committee on where we're at with that list and where we've got to in terms of disposals. It will list out where the community asset transfers are taking place, Angela, so that may be of interest to you. And we'll come forward then for this before the Q1 for next financial year with a list of prospective disposals for the following year. So what we're trying to do is encapsulate the entire process so that you're consulted at the beginning. There's a midway point, you'll see, I think it's step 22, that you're consulted during the pre-disposal process. And then, you know, that any disposals then come back for sign-off by SPA before we actually conclude on the disposal. So we're just trying to pull the whole thing together and wrap proper governance around it.
Thanks, Donna. That's really encouraging.
Yep. Tom?
Thanks, Donna. That's really helpful, and I appreciate all the assurance that's been given today. Part of the other update, earlier in the conversation, talked about what actually was agreed in the 2023 meeting, etc., and getting an update. And that, no doubt that includes the information you're talking about there just now. But a big element of this is not just the disposals, but it's what actually we're putting in place as well. There was some interdependencies in some of the closures around community hubs and things like that. So if there's any sort of ability to give us a progress report in terms of what the intentions are, or actually some of these capabilities, assets been put in place, then that would be helpful as well.
Sure.
Thanks very much. I appreciate that.
Okay, thanks, colleagues. Very helpful discussion. As we have recognised before, the further development of the communications and governance around this is work in progress, and we'll get an update in due course. And that's a helpful suggestion from Donna in terms of the update we'll get in February around disposals and future plans. And as Tom's just mentioned, there's a commitment also to update us on Project Falcon progress in due course too. Okay, that takes us on to 5.1, the Resources Committee work plan. People content with the forward plan for our committee? Yep, okay, and as always, a request if you keep the committee secretary updated with any additions or adjustments to the plan, that would be helpful. Thank you. Colleagues, we're now at the end of the public session, so we'll just pause momentarily